Hello, everyone. Welcome at our regular core protocol sync. We'll share updates on the core protocol from the team from the previous week and plans for the future. Lucien, you're the first on my screen today.
Okay, sure. My pleasure to be the first one. Okay, let me share my screen. Oops. I need to turn on. Just 1 second. Oh. I will not share my screen due to some reason. Okay, so last week, I have one PR merged to Subspace, which is to upgrade the secondary runtime on each primary runtime upgrade. Like on each primary block, we detect whether there is a primary runtime upgrade happens. Like we can check if there's a digest code runtime environment updated in the block header. If there's one, okay, there's a runtime upgrade. There's a new runtime code was set in that block. So we will retrieve the new secondary runtime from the primary runtime, and we pass this new secondary runtime to our executor, and we set this new runtime before we it's not before we craft a new set code extrinsic, which will include this new secondary runtime, and we inject this extrinsic to the regular extrinsic list extracted from the bundles from that block. So basically a new manually created set code extrinsic was added to that block to mimic the regular runtime upgrade. When you do a runtime upgrade, you can use the sudo interface, right? And we are exactly mimicking this behavior. So yes, I have done the coding, and I have also added a test. It should work. Yes. Yeah, that was the work done in the last week. So any questions on this?
Just so I understand, Liqiang, so basically the executors or the executor network has no real say in if this runtime occurs. Like if the farmer network says, hey, we've upgraded the primary runtime, then it just automatically follows through to the secondary runtime. So that's why you're using the sudo style of doing this, or similar to the sudo style.
Yes, yes.
Okay, looks like those are all questions. Thanks, Lucien.
Sorry, I thought you had more to go on, Liqiang. Do you have any more, or sorry, what are you going to be working on next for this week?
Oh, okay. So aside from we have talked yesterday, the regenesis, which is a pretty small task, I believe. So I also would like to work on an issue found by another, like when you restart the executor or you start the executor a few minutes later, when later you run the farmer node, the block number will always has a gap between the executor block number and the primary node's block number. So that is because when you if you restart or you start the executor nodes a few minutes later, the previous block or the blocks imported during the initial sync process will not be reported to the overseer. So those blocks will be kind of ignored, and we'll miss those blocks. So I would like to work on this issue. And after this, I have quite a few backlogs out there. I would like to have a discussion with another, what is priority. Yeah.
Okay. Once we have this runtime upgrade working, is there anything stopping us from having the execution or the single executor running on the incentivized testnet, or to make that just the default on our non-incentivized testnet?
Sorry, what's the big question?
Once we have the ability to support the runtime upgrades on the executor on the secondary chain, is there anything else aside from the security issues, which I know we still need to work on, all the edge cases, but is there anything from in the happy path or outside of just a normal fraud proof that is preventing us from having this deployed into, for example, our current non-incentivized testnet?
Okay. I believe we will have we'll need a simple election for the.
Assuming that we have no election, just one trusted executor, like the sequencer in Optimism.
Okay, so if there's one trusted executor, I believe we can already run one trusted executor follows the primary nodes to process each primary block. This is already there. Yeah. But there are a few issues. Really, I can run an executor node from now and fix some issues. I have noticed a few. One is this one. It's already there for quite a few time. One is was introduced in some recent commit, which somehow breaks the UI. The Polkadot is kind of used it's broken. So yeah. Otherwise, I think it's time to run this trusted executor.
I think I know what's happening with UI. It also breaks when you try to load the very first block. If you type 0 in the search and enter, it will not be able to decode something, it fails to render it. I believe we don't have some of the things in the Genesis block that the frontend expects. And maybe if the frontend thinks that it's still subspace, but it's execution which is not the same as the regular one, maybe it also expects something and breaks kind of in a similar way. So that's probably something to discuss with Leo. He might be able to take a look into that. I think that's what happens. Maybe when you change the chain spec to be named the same as the other one or something, it just got confused.
Maybe I have a closer look. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can create issues for all of those, if you have not already, Luchain, for those tasks that you think are remaining to get it into, a live network, basically to one of our test networks. So that I think that would be the next priority to sort of demonstrate that this actually works on an open network.
Okay.
After you have support for the hard spoons, that's going to definitely take priority, like you already said, but that should be a short task. To support the regenesis or the hard spoons on the incentivized testnet. So it's separate from decoupled execution workflow. I'm thinking, Nizar, do you think it would be better if we deploy this on the DevNet or the test net, not the farm net first, to test it there?
We might. I feel like we still need some kind of trivial election mechanism. Otherwise, how do we prevent someone from accidentally running it, just breaking everything?
I think isn't there like some election mechanism right now where you have to have like a key, or like there's one trusted node, or is it just like whoever connects, it works?
You mean the executor, like that?
Yeah.
Which is able to produce ER.
Yeah.
Bundles and
anyone.
ERs.
Oh,
Anyone,
okay.
okay.
I thought that we had like a pseudo or something like that in there. So
Yeah,
we
we
don't
should
have
have
the
something.
ability to restrict who can do that. Okay. Okay, so there you go. So that would be the next step then, is to make it so that we have some like pseudo, private key on the executor that it can use, and that's like the one on the access list that can generate bundles and ERs.
Okay. Okay. I'll prepare a list for all this stuff.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Quick question on that, Jeremiah. Would it be possible to just take the public key of the executor node and then use that every time you want to use for that particular network, rather than hard coding, like using a key as such?
We could do that too. We could build we could have it use Aura consensus with just one node. We're just trying to not re-implement. I just don't want to get too wrapped up in implementing something that we're just going to abandon when we move to proof of stake consensus. So if we were going to stick with Aura long term, that might make more sense. Or at least that would be my concern with that.
Well, in Aura, it's a mix of client and palettes. It's not just like you can copy paste it as is into our context for executors. It needs to be like tweaked a little bit at least. So that will be quite a bit of work, and we'll probably abandon it.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, but go ahead.
Cool. Last week, mostly. Let me share my screen. Okay. Last week we got this one merged. So this PR combines the feeds palette that we have with the grant finality that we introduced a previous week. So what it does is basically connecting the dots here in the feed wallet, in the feeds palette. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. The feeds palette using a feed validator, which is implemented by the grant finality, and we kind of connect the dots in the runtime itself, because it would be easier for us to do a parallel compilation of those palettes before we, like, instead of depending on one another. Let me show you where we connect those dots in the runtime. Here. Yeah. So we just expose a bunch of initializer as well as the validate functions from the finality verifier, and we just connect them here, pass them over here. And we have a new palette, the grant finality. It doesn't expose any calls. We just use it for storage purposes to actually store required metadata to actually verify the finality proofs. But from that, the rest should be pretty straightforward. Just calling the validation function when put is called. Let me go there. Yeah, calling the validate function when a put is called, given that this particular feed should be validated, or and then calling the initialization function when we are actually creating the feed for the first time. While this is currently done this way, Nazar and I, we worked on a feed specification that will follow this particular implementation with some more changes that are specifically to the feeds palette, not at all related to grandpa finality. That will remain same as is, if not like the verification will remain same. Maybe some superficial changes just to get adjusted to the new feeds spec that we have. So that's the previous one. What I'm working currently on is the spec. Feel free to take a look at the spec in the Notion, but I'm just going to simply share the changes that we have done so far based on that spec so that it's easier to follow. Yeah, this is still a draft, so don't go cursing me if you find any nitpicks there. But what we are introducing in that spec is basically something called a feed processor. A feed processor, at the moment, we expect to do a bunch of things for a given data that we're given. It could do validation, it could extract the metadata out of a given data that is presented to it, or it could also give out object mappings in a given block. Like for example, we have multiple key value data in a given data object that got sent in. The object mapping is one place where it actually clearly separates out those two objects so that we can store it on our farmer distributed key value store. And yeah, apart from that, we also focused on like this feeds proposal is basically focused on improving the feeds palette in general. Like right now we have a create and we have a put, and we want to bring in more structure around it. Like, can we update the feed if something need to be updated? Can we stop tracking the feed? Can we make it inactive so that no one can push any more feeds to it? Or we also want to introduce, can we delete the feed as well? Like completely remove all the state data that pertains to a particular feed ID. So this the feed processor kind of encompasses that, whichever implements it as well, so that everyone cascadingly does all the operations that needs to be done. Apart from the feed processor, what the changes that I've spoke about would be these, like changes to the new create version of it, how we initialize the data if need to be, and then how we validate the data. Not a lot change here, except how instead of using feed validators that we used before, we just go with feed processor. And these are the two new functions that like or extrinsics or externalities that we are bringing in: closing a feed and deleting a feed. Closing a feed just closes it, doesn't accept any more new data, and deleting actually removes all the state data as well, along with freeing up the feed ID. So it could be reclaimed by someone who wants to have a same feed ID as well. Apart from that,
sorry, Fred, can I ask, what's the difference between init and create?
Okay, so init is completely invisible for the user. You usually go with a feed create and then feed put and then feed close, feed delete. Init is a technical detail per se for this particular underlying implementation of a finality verifier that we're using. It would require some kind of initial data to go with to actually start verifying the blocks that are coming in next. So in order to have that, yeah, go for it.
So like init is called like before anything can happen to the feed. Who calls the init, or is the init abstracted behind the create?
Init is abstracted behind create. Like whenever you're creating, you're initializing. So underlying feed processor could be initialized with whatever data that they would need, or it would need to process the feeds that are coming in next. Cool. And yeah, and the final change here is how we extract the object mappings. since we do expect the feed processor to give you multiple object mappings rather than a single object mapping that we used to before, so we had to adjust this implementation of extracting the object mappings from the call. Here, I've just only limited the changes here. I will, like, again, those changes on the actual runtime is not adjusted yet because I'm focusing on a very constrained palette. But this is what we have so far. Any questions, just have a look at feed spec. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll be happy to answer it.
Don't worry, give it to next week. I will have a lot of questions to ask you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, the idea is the default behavior that we had before, where we don't validate anything and just map the whole content to the hash of it. That will be still one of the implementations of the processor, it'll be like default processor, basically. It will almost do nothing. All right, any questions to Will?
Any estimate on when we'll have this merged and when we can start doing feeds validation for Kusama?
Okay, I would need a few more days to actually finish the changes, the outlying changes apart from the feeds palette. Again, I think it would take this week to actually get this merged in if everything is within team's purview, right? Again, that I cannot guarantee, Jeremiah, but I would say like optimistically end of this week, and then relayer changes, I will talk with Serge simultaneously to keep him updated before we get this one merged. And I'm hopeful that we can work with Serge to actually get those changes as well. Post that, yeah, I think we would have to still figure out how we want to go with this one. Like, I think it would depend on how we want to do regenesis or spooling it. So I would say end of this week would be a best bet to get this in, and then we can have more after that.
Great. Okay, we can go into more detail at the integration sync later this week.
Awesome, thank you. Ozgan, do you have anything to share this week?
Nothing important. Just today, when trying to import the partial replica support to desktop app, I figured that the monorepo is creating an issue when it's imported, and Ivan can take the lead on explaining that. I just created the issue, Ivan solved it, so I'm gonna pass it to Ivan when it's his turn.
Okay, Ivan, let's go with you then.
Sure, yeah. Let me share my screen. I guess I can start with that exact issue, which Ozgan has been talking about. So yeah, the issue was that we started to have the Nazar introduced the Subspace builder tools or something. We create was called like that. So and the thing is, we just used it in the manner in the manner which looks like this. We just took the manifest directory from the Rust and and just appended.
Ivan, can you make it bigger?
Oh yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So so yeah, and we just use relative path relative to our cargo.toml file in order to find the target directory. So at first I hit this issue with the custom cargo target directory, which I set personally. I set it globally for like any kind of project in order to like share the cache between various builds. So yeah, we at first we merged this kind of workaround so that my setup would work. But Ozgan discovered today that there is some other issues related to that. So yeah, the issue is that if we import the subspace, some of the crates in the subspace monorepo, the setup will be broken as we will try to find the target directory inside of .cargo folder, which is actually never true. So and today I implemented the fix for that. It is still some kind of neat workaround because I just moved all of the target finding inside the Subspace WASM tools library. Basically, we just try to find the target directory using the outdir variable, which is also set by cargo. We even try to find the relative directory twice because it happens to be nested. Because of weird setup of the substrate WASM tools. So I hope we can finalize it soon. I guess as Ozgun needs it. That was all related to these bugs. So during the last week, I was working on adding a limit for a plot size within the consensus. So the main changes were related to this function. Basically, we just added another check for the solutions. We just check that the XOR distance between this index hash and the farmer public key it is just less than the maximum distance of which we happen to calculate using the estimation of number of pieces from the blockchain.
By the way, I just noticed it's called key, the variable in the arguments. It should be either public key or farmer public key. I don't remember. Try to look at the code base so it's consistent.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, I also just noticed it also. Yeah, didn't pay attention to it beforehand. Yeah, I guess we can change it sometime later. Yeah, and apart from that, we added some other constant for the. Let me just find it for our runtime. It just looks like this. We just added some other constant for our pilot subspace actually. Yeah, pilot subspace needs the max plot size, which says how many pieces should each farmer or plot at maximum have. So yeah, it was finalized during the last week. Apart from that, I was working on the adding the also there was another bug which was discovered by search that the plot wasn't cleared fully. And it is actually merged right now. So we just added, and I just added the regression test in order to not to miss any new files which we add into the plot directory. And apart from that, I was basically working on the multi-replica support. I basically landed like two designs of that. We discussed with another a bit of that. So the thing is that the first design was a bit like going from the bottom to the top, as I introduced several various new abstractions. Like at first I renamed the plot abstraction into the single plot, and after that I added the multi-plot abstraction, which is basically encapsulates only just a plot, and introduces some writing abstractions around this plot. And after that, I added some more layers of multiplying abstraction on each piece of the farming itself. So, like for example, let me just find it. So for example, in plotting the same, but Nazar, same follows with the plotting and other pieces, but Nazar introduced some other design so that we could basically wrap just a single farmer and just spawn like several identities on the top level, so that the design will go from top to the bottom and won't change anything, any low level detail. Let me just find it. yeah, here it is basically. Yeah, we just basically spawn some number of plots. Yeah, we just spawn the vplot abstraction, vplotting abstraction, which does writing to the disk to the plot itself, and we spawn the farming abstraction. Yeah, and we just spawn it for each replica on the top level, and yeah, and after that, just wait for those. Yeah. On the top level, that's it. There will be still a follow-up to this PR, as we will need to move the block archiving to the top level, as right now the block archiving spawns for each for each plot. Yeah, and it's kind of CPU intensive task. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's it from my side.
Yeah, Vaughn, could you just give a try to give like a plain English, like simple description of how it would happen right now if once we deploy this, and let's say that the blockchain size is 1 gigabyte, the blockchain history, the encoded blockchain history, okay, the archive blockchain is 1 gigabyte, and I go into the setting and I dedicate, let's say, one terabyte to my plot. How would this work right now?
Yeah. So right now, maximum amount of pieces on each farmer is around 100 gigabytes, but we still have an assumption that the blockchain size itself is more than the 100 gigabytes. So we will have like 10 plots of 1 gigabyte each. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so we'll create 10 partial plots basically, or
Uh-huh.
Full replicas but partial plots.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
and then
right.
those plots will just grow automatically as
Yeah.
the blockchain grows.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Does that make sense to everybody?
Question, like, would they grow in size, or would we use a maximum distance to actually remove the pieces that might not fit in?
They'll
First
grow
one.
in size to 100 gigabytes, and then they will stop growing. Then we'll
Okay.
switch to partial replica automatically.
And would
Okay,
that also depend on the, sorry, Jeremiah, would that also
No, go ahead.
depend
Go ahead.
on the, would that also depend on the maximum distance that we define on the runtime itself? Like the amount like that we grow, like the 100 GB that you said, Nagar, like, is that something that we calculate based on the max distance that we get from the runtime, or is it more like
Yeah, so there is a constant max plot size, and depending on the current history size, it is translated into the actual distance, because
But
that
it's not,
distance will
okay.
shrink all the time.
Okay, but it's not implemented as part of the consensus, the max plot size, or
It is verified as part of the consensus.
Yeah. Yeah, I can share this screen again. We can go through that PR again.
Yeah,
if you want
let's
to.
go, because it's not clear.
Sure, yeah. Let me just find it. Yep. Yeah, I shared the screen again. So basically, we have the pilot subspace, which right now will ask for the constant of the max plot size, and by having and with having that constant, we also would need to have the calculation of total pieces of total number of pieces in the whole blockchain. So yeah, having those two would let us to check in the consensus that we, yeah, let me just find it. Yeah, I see consensus. Yeah. That would let us to check that the solution which was proposed by a farmer, but the piece index which farmers send us it is actually inside of its range, in the range of the total amount of pieces which farmer can store. So basically, we check it like this. At first, we take the maximum amount of basically take the biggest constant which is possible. We just take 0x and that.
Namespace size.
Yeah, basically the namespace size, right? And we divide it by the total amount of pieces and multiply it by maximum size. If you think about it, it is just that we take the we divide the we find the average average distance between two pieces, and after that we multiply on how many pieces do we actually need to have on our range, basically. Yeah. If and after that we just compare the XOR distance with that piece index to that max distance which we have just calculated. Yeah. Is it understandable?
I think on the high level, if our blockchain in general is like all archived history is smaller than the max plot size, we will plot everything, right?
True.
If it's twice as big, then basically our namespace that is available for a particular farmer will be half of that. So that formula basically proportionally shrinks it as the history gets bigger. That's basically it.
Makes sense.
Actually, I'm thinking about it now. Wouldn't that formula overflow?
Yeah.
Um,
When you
at what time?
When you multiply, if the total pieces is 1, and when you multiply, like I just need to
The max plot size is 100 gigabytes.
I'm actually
Just
quite
overflow.
surprised that compiler didn't say anything about it though.
It's not a bug. I think it behaves differently in the debug and production mode. They have some overflows disabled in the release and just do or checks and do overflows. And in debug they panic.
At what time it should overflow? I didn't get still.
No, if you isn't there like a variable, a Tomo variable for overflow checks, and if you don't have it,
there is. I think you can configure behavior, but in blockchains, in consensus especially, you usually use checked math.
Yeah.
And you check for overflow, or you do saturated multiplication if you want to.
I think in this case we would have to go with something like saturating, so that we don't just go out as soon as it's, because this would pretty much happen like the first piece itself.
So Ivan, you divide it by 1 because that's current history, and you multiply it by 100 gigabytes because that's the max, and it shoots outside of the range immediately.
No, we have. Yeah, let me share the screen again. We have a check for that. Yeah. So we basically, if the total amount of pieces is less than the max plot size, we just plot it.
All right.
Yeah. It's fine.
Okay. False alarm.
Yeah, I mean, that's good that you handled that, but I think it is a best practice that we should not use regular multiplication or addition or subtraction. I think we in the runtime, you always use saturating add or multiplication.
That's not runtime, but yeah. But it's written properly. It doesn't matter in this case because it is handled properly.
I guess we can add some clip links for that. I mean, we can check, especially in some crates, that we using the saturated add or checked add. Yeah, these kind of things.
Yeah, I sometimes just enable in CLI on individual call in Clippy pedantic links and just go through them to see what the complaints about and what maybe should be adopted, what not. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes just for self-education, basically.
True, yeah. But there are some useless links there, yeah. But most of them are good.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Do you want about any of this?
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, multi-replica farming, distributed farming, it's done. it works. We're ready to start testing it, start deploying it.
Yeah, I guess I'm waiting right now for Nazar's review, I guess. Yeah, I fixed all of the issues. Yeah, everything should be fine.
Okay. Oskin, do you have a clear understanding of how this works and how we need to adapt the desktop application to support this?
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, on the farmer side, the multi thing is implemented outside of the library. It's just like on CLI level, so you can already create multiple plots on the desktop side. It's not in the library, at least not yet.
Osgun, we can go through the through that PR later if you want to.
Can be beneficial, yeah.
Okay, so sorry, if I heard you right, Nazar, we do have to make some updates to the API for the library so that it can support it, or else
Okay, so the way it's implemented right now, we already had farming and plotting process. So like you create dependencies and then you start it. Now we just wrap that in a function and we call it multiple times with different paths.
Right.
So it's like starts one plot in one folder, another plot in another folder, but like internally it's the whole, it's the whole process. So basically,
Oskin would have to like re-implement it the same way. So it'd probably be better just to expose that.
Yeah, that's why we will probably discuss with Ivan how we can abstract away the outer thing as a library. So you can just call one thing and have multiple plots created. But conceptually, it will be still kind of the same thing.
Okay. So there is some more additional work that needs to be done then before this can be properly implemented in the desktop?
It can be properly implemented the same way it's done in CLI. It's like
copy-paste.
Nice to have, I would say.
Yeah.
It feels like we're accumulating a lot of copy and paste between these two implementations.
Yeah, we do.
Right now, yes. But as soon as we switch to, let's say, using system keychain for storing private keys on the desktop side of things, or we switch from the WebSockets to the direct channels on the RPC side, they will start diverging just because the use cases are different. So we'll think how we can abstract it away, but they will not be the same eventually, just temporary artifact.
Yeah, I think it's it also won't take much time. As as I first implemented one approach of going through multi-replica. Yeah, after that I just did the I opened UPR in one day, so that could be solved also like in one day or something.
Actually, it might be somewhat simple because the identity that is used in the plot, it's like completely independent from anything else.
Yeah.
So we can generate it on the plot without any keychain potentially.
I had that in mind also. Yeah, that's why it's just literally a separate thing.
I have two questions. One of them is okay. The first one is should I continue implementing partial replica, because if this is going to be merged like very soon, I can just start implementing multi-replica support.
I think it would make more sense to start with multi-replica, no?
Well, I don't think. Okay, so there are two parts to it. One is the UI, right? So you can select how much space you want to dedicate, and the other one is to actually implement the backend part.
Yeah.
So I think front-end part you can do already. The backend part is something that you can also do already. You just have to move it around a little bit later. But the core logic is the same. It creates multiple plots of the smaller size, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should continue to implement the features incrementally as they're released. Because if we try to start bundling a whole bunch of these together, it's going to be much harder to unpack the bugs or the side effects that we see.
Okay. The second thing is probably for Thursday, but Nazar, you said storing the private keys on keychain. Why?
For security purposes, on Mac you have system keychain, on Linux you have system keychain. I believe you should have something on Windows. Basically, if you want to if you want to unlock it, you'll have to unlock with fingerprint or type a password instead of storing in plain files. So like
Are
if
you
there is some
talking
kind
about-
of
Are you talking about the signing keys or the reward address?
reward address will be generated and like I think shown once, but we can potentially store it in the keychain as well. But we also have identities for plots which can also be stored in the keychain, not in the plain text.
Okay, so you're talking about the signing keys.
Yeah.
How is that managed on the terminal application right now?
It's just written in the file, like a binary file with a private key.
Okay. But could we also manage that in the same way as we are in the desktop app?
We can potentially use keychain for that. The challenge is that sometimes people run it on the server where there is no such keychain. Not the traditional sense. We can probably make it optional, but that's like, we'll see. I think those that like run it on the server, they are more aware of like security implications, I guess. Hopefully, but on the desktop side, we should make it like bulletproof.
When would
regular
those signing
use.
keys get unlocked?
During start of the application. It will be like kept in RAM instead of on disk.
Oh, so you mean every time that you restart your computer, you'd have to authenticate?
Yeah. Usually, like on Linux, it's unlocked with your login. So it's like stored in an encrypted file physically, but once you log in, it will be unlocked and you can use it. If you lock the computer, it locks.
Right.
Like it's just synced with everything. I believe it's the same kind of thing on Mac.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I can also share the screen. Yeah, I think this one. Can you see it?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I think I've explained on a previous week the consensus verification fix. It wasn't merged, but it got merged afterwards, so I don't have to go through it again. I think this is also discussed, and this is what Duchenne used, so I don't have to go through that either, even though it was merged 6 days ago. I was hacking a little bit, trying to see how to put the secondary node into the primary one instead of the other way around. And I found that there is actually a lot of code that will have to like move and support that we no longer need. So I just did some, like I was reading the code and was finding things that are no longer necessary or some things that can be simplified. And I was basically doing cleanups. And I had 4 of them. So one was merged, it removed some of the code. The other one is still open. And it removed some of the code. And there are 2 more. This one is pretty big. And in the end, what we have is all these palettes that we've adopted from Polkadot, they are basically reduced to bare minimum. So for instance, we have this chain API subsystem for Overseer, and it just contains basically this. So we have a few calls that we care about, and just like runtime API calls. And we don't have anything extra. And this has happened to all of the other subsystems. We have chain API, we have runtime API, and we have the what was called collation generation, I believe. Yeah. And I have an idea currently to combine those into kind of one, and then try to expand macro in Overseer and basically inline it everything together, and then remove Overseer as such, but retain the functionality. So I can see like what parts of Overseer we are actually using, because Overseer itself is a pretty massive thing, primarily because it has generation, it has proc macro, and there is a whole bunch of stuff. And like the amount of code it expands to is just enormous. It's very hard to understand what's going on. And I think we can replace things like if you go to core chain API, what we are doing basically is we are just making a few like this is client. We are just doing a few client calls. So once we include the secondary runtime in the primary or secondary node in the primary one, we can basically call the primary node directly. So this client will be available as a variable. You don't need to go through overseer, you just can call a method on it. So I just want to see like clearly how it actually ties together, because before and still right now it's like 5 layers deep in the abstractions, but I don't think we actually need them. So I was basically going through the code and removing some dependencies. I removed the Jagger and some of the metrics. We are not monitoring them, we are not using them, and they are not like fully refactored the way it was. So we'll probably re-add something slightly different in the end later. It was just a lot of burden to carry. So I think like about 2,000-3,000 lines of code removed with these PRs. And after that, I think we are pretty close to actually start integrating it. But that will be one of the next steps. And probably Luchain will do it. We'll see how it goes. But that's for now how it is. So a lot of code removed from the Polkadot folder and from the Cumulus folder as well. That was on the code side. That was, I think, most of what I was doing. Spent quite a lot of time reviewing code from all of the folks. So great job there. Yeah. I think that's primarily it. There were several discussions with Polkadot folks. On the networking side, Bastian asked, what are we trying to do exactly with networking? I explained, he said, thank you. And basically there is no clear way, like how can I contribute to them to like help them do the refactoring that they wanted to do. And there was another discussion that I started on the runtime side of things, where there is a way to do more efficient gas metering in the private contracts, and they are aware of it. Just didn't get to implement the optimization. Right now, they're making host calls every time they need to increase the gas counter, but there is a way to use global variable instead, kind of like Near does, and they will do it later. So that's great news. Other than that, on the code side, I think that's about it. This week, I hope to have finally time to work on the networking, but we'll see. Also, we had, I guess we also had discussion with Jeremiah how we can maybe work around that for now. And one way would be to make the node aware of the farmer a little bit more, and then it will basically wait for farmer to consume the archived pieces before moving forward. That way we don't have to store archival history on the node, but also farmer doesn't have to duplicate the work. Because the state of the networking library that we have right now is kind of experimental. We didn't really test it on any kind of scale. So it wouldn't be very wise to rely on it on the testnet to actually like plot everything. But we can still have the full node instead of archival on the substrate side that way. And we'll probably run a few archival nodes on our side on like Subspace labs for people to sync their nodes. But that will be the only purpose for those. And that will be like a short-term solution once we figure out the other things and Substrate is refactored on the networking side and everything. So maybe I'll just switch to that and implement that, because it doesn't seem likely that they will have what we need them to have on the Substrate side upstream anytime soon. Just to have our incentivized testnet starting. Okay, any questions? That's not good. No one has questions.
Quick question on the archival node. Like, do we, like, maybe I missed it, Nazar, but the goal would be to actually not have the actual archival node, but rather use the farmer as an archiver to actually get more data out when you are syncing.
Eventually, only farmers will store archival history. like we were talking about the scale where running archival node will be not feasible for most people unless you like write a custom client and like some distributed file system which can store petabytes of data. So that's like one reason. The other reason is that it takes a lot of space. Basically, if you have a big history of the blockchain, you'll have to store that plus the plot, however big you can fit it on the remaining size. So you really want that to be a full client, like storing last some blocks. And in the end, you want it to be a light client even. So you don't have to store almost anything. So you can use most of your space for actual plotting and earn rewards. Otherwise, we have this farmer's dilemma, which we wanted to solve.
One thing scared me, like you said, we should not rely on syncing from other farmers on the testnet. I was including the changes related to that to desktop. Should I not include them?
What do you mean?
Like subspace networking, syncing the farmer from other farmers?
Why does it matter where it syncs from?
You said we haven't tested it and we should not rely on it for testnet. Maybe I misheard.
Okay, yeah, I think there is a confusion. So we have subspace networking that I've created.
Yeah.
That will be used for the DSN.
Yes. You know.
So that one is not like basically tested, right? But the way like Node syncs right now, that's still in place. So if you're using that one, that's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
like
which one were you
what-
using, Özkan?
I'm using the one that's in the main RS at the moment in the monorepo.
So that's the default substrate networking.
Yeah.
Well, there are many main RS in the monorepo, so
No. I under command farm RS. It's using subspace networking, and I believe it tries to get in the DSN and sync from other farmers. At least that's
that was an optional feature. I think we
Mhm.
can skip it for now. It's like modular, so you can include it or not include it.
Yeah, I know.
For those, we will need separate bootstrap nodes, so I think you can skip it for now.
Okay, I will skip for now.
But we will want to start testing it like as an optional feature and see how it behaves soon.
Okay, so you were starting to implement that, but none of that has been published yet, Özkan, or released?
For this partial replica and this networking thing, those were
Just
in
for the
same
just for the networking.
No, none of them is released.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have still 3 minutes. All right. Thanks, guys, for great work. Thanks those who are still around watching on YouTube. And we'll see you next week. Bye.